When Prince Harry agreed to sit down with Jake Tapper on CNN, producers expected a thoughtful and perhaps redemptive discussion, an opportunity for the Duke of Sussex to restore some dignity after months of public scrutiny. But within minutes of the cameras rolling, it was evident this wouldn't be a courteous exchange. Harry's confidence bordered on arrogance, and Jake's patience felt razor-sharp. By the end, the studio would be left in stunned silence, and Harry would walk out of CNN headquarters mid-broadcast. That evening, the CNN studio carried an unusual stillness, the kind that lingers right before something unforgettable. Jake Tapper calmly reviewed his notes, his expression giving nothing away. He'd interviewed world leaders, generals, and presidents before. But tonight's guest felt different. When Prince Harry entered, the atmosphere shifted. Wearing a tailored gray jacket and an open-collared white shirt, he greeted the crew with a polite yet distant nod. Confidence marked his stride, or perhaps defiance disguised his confidence. Jake rose to shake his hand. "Harry, thank you for joining us." "Pleasure," Harry replied smoothly, though his tone sounded formal rather than warm. "Good to be here, I suppose." They sat opposite each other. The intro music faded, the red light blinked on, and the interview began. "Prince Harry," Jake began in his calm, measured tone, "you've often said living in America has given you a new sense of freedom. Let's start there. How has that freedom treated you?" Harry leaned back, a faint smirk forming. "Well, Jake, freedom's been quite nice. Waking up without orders from a century-old institution is refreshing." Jake smiled politely, expecting that edge. "So life in California suits you?" "It's paradise," Harry said with a shrug. "The air's cleaner, the press is slightly less hostile, not by much. And people actually smile when you walk past them." "Do you miss the UK at all?" Jake asked lightly. Harry's expression tightened. "I miss certain people, not the circus. The rest I can live without." There it was, the first crack in composure. Jake noticed but didn't push yet. "You've mentioned stepping back from royal duties helped you and your family live more authentically," Jake continued. "How would you describe that authenticity now?" Harry crossed his leg, calm and deliberate. "Authenticity means not performing for anyone. I'm finally able to be myself, not who the monarchy, the press, or the world expects me to be." Jake tilted his head slightly. "That's interesting. You've done several interviews, a documentary series, even a memoir, all centered on defining yourself publicly. Isn't that still a form of performance?" Harry's smirk faded. "You could see it that way," he said slowly. "Or you could say I'm finally telling my own story, something most journalists wouldn't understand." Jake's eyes glimmered with mild amusement. "You might be surprised by what journalists do understand." Harry leaned forward, his tone sharpening. "Understanding and compassion aren't the same thing, are they?" "No," Jake replied evenly. "But neither are facts and feelings." The air tightened. Harry chuckled lightly, though it sounded forced. "You're good at this, Jake. Always calm, slightly patronizing, must work well on politicians." Jake didn't react. "It's not meant to be patronizing, just curious." "Curious," Harry echoed with irony. "That's a polite word for intrusive." Jake folded his hands on the desk, steady. "I think the public is curious about someone who claims to reject the spotlight while staying in it." Harry's eyes narrowed. "You mean people like you?" "I mean the audience," Jake said, calm as ever. "The same people who watched your series, read your book, and tuned in tonight to hear your side again." Harry gave a cold laugh. "And you think that makes me a hypocrite?" "I didn't say that," Jake replied carefully. "But it's a fair question, isn't it? You speak of privacy, yet share deeply personal family details. Where's the line?" Harry's jaw tightened. "The line," he said firmly, "is where I draw it, not anyone else." Jake nodded slowly. "Even if that line keeps moving?" That one landed. Harry's expression darkened. "You sound like the British tabloids, Jake. Next you'll say I'm ungrateful for wanting peace." Jake leaned back unfazed. "I'm just asking what peace looks like when it's broadcasted." Harry exhaled sharply, his irritation visible. "That's the problem. People like you don't want peace, you want content. You want headlines like where Harry loses his temper. You want a moment like this." Jake looked directly at him. "You're giving it to me." The silence that followed was thick and electric. Harry sat back, eyes locked on Jake, his smile gone. The room seemed smaller, the cameras closer. In the control booth, a producer whispered, "Keep rolling." Jake straightened his notes, his tone even. "Let's take a short break." When we return, we'll talk about family, legacy, and what Prince Harry says he's truly fighting for. The red light blinked off, but the tension stayed. Harry leaned in, voice low and cold. You wanted a reaction, didn't you? Jake didn't look up. No, Your Highness. Just an honest answer. Harry's jaw tensed. You won't get one if you keep treating me like a headline. Jake finally looked up, meeting his stare. Then stop acting like one. The control room went silent again. The break hadn't even started, and the interview was already on the brink. When the lights came back on, the crew moved quietly, as if afraid any sound could shatter the thin civility left in the room. As the red light blinked again, Jake smiled for the audience, composed but determined. Welcome back, he said. We're here with Prince Harry, discussing his life, his work, and the choices that have shaped both. Harry nodded stiffly, his face polite but wary. I hope we can keep this on track, he said with a tight smile. Jake ignored the remark. Let's talk about your family for a moment. You've said stepping back was to protect them. Do you think that mission's been successful? Harry took a slow breath. My family's safety is my top priority. Meghan and I are raising our children away from the chaos of the British press, away from constant lies. In that sense, yes, it's been successful. Jake continued gently. Do you ever worry that by speaking publicly about your family, you might be drawing more attention to them? Harry pressed his lips thin. It's interesting how that idea keeps coming up. I talk about my story, not my children's. The press just refuses to see the difference, Jake nodded. But you did share personal moments in your memoir, conversations with your father, private exchanges with your brother. Harry cut him off, voice sharp. Because people deserve the truth. For years, the palace and media painted me as reckless or disloyal. Was I supposed to stay silent while they profited off lies about me? Jake kept his tone calm. Maybe not silence, he said carefully, but perhaps restraint. Harry raised an eyebrow. Restraint? After decades of being misrepresented? After what that system did to my mother? The word mother hung heavy. Diana. Jake paused, then asked softly, Do you think you're still haunted by what happened to her? Harry's face tensed. Haunted? It's not an accusation, Jake clarified quickly. You've mentioned her often. Feeling pursued, misunderstood, trapped. Do you feel you're reliving her story? For a moment, Harry didn't answer. His gaze drifted, something flickering behind his eyes, pain or anger. Then he smiled coldly. That's quite the psychological take, Jake. Didn't realize CNN was doing therapy now. Jake didn't smile back. It's an honest question, Harry. Harry leaned forward slightly, voice low. And it's an offensive one. You're implying I'm broken because of her death, reducing my life to her tragedy. Jake remained steady. I'm not reducing anything. I'm asking if that loss shapes how you see the world today. Harry's jaw tightened. It shaped how I see hypocrisy, Harry began, his voice steady but sharp. Especially in the media. The same industry that destroyed my mother now pretends to care about my well-being. Forgive me if I'm not eager to play along. Jake's composure cracked slightly. With respect, Harry, you're not being chased by paparazzi in Montecito. You live in one of the most private, exclusive areas in the U.S. You've chosen to remain visible. Harry's tone turned cold. That's ironic, coming from someone who profits off other people's lives. A quiet murmur rippled through the crew. Jake drew a breath, clearly keeping himself in check. There's a difference between journalism and spectacle, Harry scoffed. Oh, spare me. You're all the same. Whether it's London tabloids or American networks, you thrive on drama, you push until someone bleeds, and then you call it news. Jake straightened his notes, patience thinning. If you think asking questions is provocation, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to this. Maybe I shouldn't have, Harry shot back. But it's telling how quickly the American press shows its real face when you stop being polite. The air was thick with tension. Jake leaned forward, abandoning his polished calm. Harry, for years you've talked about the media, criticizing it, fighting it, and yes, benefiting from it. You've built a public identity around rejecting attention while constantly seeking it. Isn't that? Harry cut in sharply, voice rising. Watch your words, Jake didn't back down. Isn't that contradiction why people question your sincerity? The silence was charged. Harry's breathing quickened. You think this is some kind of act? That losing my home, my titles, my privacy was for publicity? Jake met his glare evenly. I think you've turned pain into a platform. Maybe that's understandable, even admirable, But when you live in the spotlight, you don't get to choose which questions come with it. For a few long seconds, no one moved. The air was so heavy that even the cameras seemed to hum louder. Harry's tone dropped, cold and deliberate. "You're crossing a line, Jake." Jake's voice was quiet but firm. "Or maybe I'm just the first person who didn't bow." The crew froze. Harry leaned back, face unreadable, eyes darkening. "You think you're clever," he muttered. Jake stared straight ahead. "No, just doing my job." Harry gave a low, humorless laugh. "You'll regret that." "Then we'll both have something to discuss next time," Jake replied smoothly. But both knew there wouldn't be a next time. In the control booth, a voice whispered urgently, "Cut to break before this blows up on air." When the third segment began, the studio felt tense, drained of warmth. The red light flicked on again. Jake sat perfectly upright, calm but unyielding. Across from him, Prince Harry leaned back, jaw tight, expression unreadable though his irritation showed. Jake began carefully. "Before the break, you spoke about media intrusion and your desire for peace. Let me ask, does that pursuit ever become a pursuit of control?" Harry gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Control? Jake, I've earned the right to steer my own life. After everything I've faced, that's not control, that's survival." Jake nodded slowly. "I understand that. But critics argue that your story of survival has become a brand, that it's less about peace now and more about staying relevant." Harry's eyes hardened. "You mean the critics hiding behind keyboards, profiting from my family's pain?" "Yes, I'm deeply concerned about their opinions." Jake stayed composed. "It's not about opinions, Harry. It's about perception. You've done a documentary, a memoir, countless interviews. People are asking when sharing your truth becomes selling it." Harry leaned forward, tone clipped. "And there it is, the old cash-in accusation. You journalists can't resist, can you? You twist the truth for years, then call it exploitation when someone finally tells their side." "I'm not accusing," Jake said evenly. "I'm asking." "Same thing," Harry snapped. For a moment, neither man moved. The silence was thick, both staring each other down. Jake broke it softly. "Let's talk about your brother, Prince William." Harry cut him off instantly. "No, I'm not doing this. I'm only asking if—" "No," Harry said again, sharper. "You don't get to turn this into another soap opera. My family isn't your entertainment." Jake sighed quietly. "Harry, you've already spoken about those issues publicly." "I wrote about my experience," Harry interrupted. "That doesn't mean I owe anyone updates." Jake nodded slightly, his voice gaining weight. "Then help me understand. You've built a public identity around telling your truth. But when someone asks you to clarify, you call it intrusion. Isn't that a contradiction?" Harry gave a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "No, Jake, it's called setting boundaries. Something your industry doesn't seem to understand." Jake leaned back, patience waning. "Boundaries work both ways, Harry. You can't demand privacy while inviting cameras into your home." Harry's tone turned cutting. "And you can't pretend to be objective while clearly enjoying the tension." Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't enjoy drama. I just don't run from difficult questions." Harry smirked, his voice like ice. "Of course not, you hide behind them." That hit hard. The crew went silent. A sound tech froze mid-motion behind the console. Jake paused before speaking, his tone now lower, sharper. "You know, I've interviewed war leaders, survivors of atrocities, people who faced horrors they can barely describe, and they managed to answer without turning it into a performance." Harry's eyes flashed. "A performance? You think this is an act?" Jake's tone stayed firm. "I think you've learned to turn every question into confrontation. Maybe that works in Hollywood, but not here." Harry's fist tightened on the armrest. "This isn't about Hollywood. It's about you trying to corner me." "I'm not trying to corner you," Jake replied calmly. "I'm trying to understand why every discussion becomes about how misunderstood you are." Harry's voice rose. "Because I am misunderstood. You think headlines define me? You think a few interviews explain who I am? You don't know me." Jake didn't blink. "Then show us." The silence that followed was deafening. Harry's breathing was harsh, his voice trembling slightly with restrained anger. "You don't get to tell me who to be," he said finally, his voice low and sharp. "You sit there pretending to care about truth when all you want is a viral clip. That's what this is, bait for ratings." Jake's reply came slowly. "You know what's interesting, Harry? Whenever someone challenges you, you question their motives. Maybe that says less about them and more about you." Harry froze. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then he leaned in, eyes cold. "You're lucky I'm not my father. Jake blinked. Excuse me? Harry gave a faint smirk. He'd have walked out 10 minutes ago. Jake's response was quiet but cutting. Maybe he'd have handled it with more grace. That landed hard. Harry stiffened instantly. The cameras were still rolling, the tension unbearable. Behind the glass, a producer mouthed, "Cut." But the director shook his head. It was too raw to stop. Harry exhaled sharply, locking eyes with Jake. You've just proven exactly what's wrong with the media. No respect, no empathy, no idea what it's like to live under constant scrutiny. Jake stayed level. Respect isn't automatic, Harry. It's earned, even by princes. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Harry stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. You think you're clever, he said, voice colder now. But all you've done is remind me why I left that world behind. Jake looked up, calm and composed. And yet you keep walking back into it. Harry's glare burned. Then this interview is over. Jake's voice didn't waver. Then so is the illusion.